The young and the restless spoilers shock. The night began with a deceptive sense of civility, masked under warm smiles and clinking glasses. Damian entered the Corinthian-style lounge with an easy gait, welcomed by a scent of aged mahogany and imported cigars that lingered in the corners like ghosts of old betrayals. The ambience was decadent yet intimate, lit by low-hanging chandeliers whose crystals danced softly in the reflection of golden liquor. Cane stood at the center of the room, casually poised beside the fireplace, dressed with a formal elegance that concealed something darker, something calculating. His eyes shimmered with a restrained satisfaction when he spotted Damian approaching. He walked forward with open arms, exuding brotherhood, masking the venom that laced his smile. Damian smiled in return, genuinely warmed by the invitation. It had been a surprise, after all. Being asked to share a private evening with the very man whose history with Lily cast long shadows over their present. The two men greeted each other with firm, friendly handshakes, and a few pats on the back, like old acquaintances laying down arms, like warriors sheathing their blades for a moment of peace. But under the surface, the air trembled with buried motives, unspoken doubts, and a silence too careful to be genuine. They talked, as men do when pride must be kept in check. Cane sipped from a crystal tumbler filled with a dark amber liquor, swirling it slowly, letting its scent rise like an offering. "I want to be honest with you tonight," he said, eyes meeting Damian's with measured intensity. "I still love Lily. I always will. But I see now, she's happy with you. And that's enough for me." Damian blinked in mild surprise, his guard softening. He nodded slowly, as if trying to process the idea that Cane was extending an olive branch instead of a dagger. "That means a lot to," Damian replied, his voice thick with relief. He didn't know that he had just stepped over a tripwire, didn't know that the warmth in Cane's voice was the quiet hum of a storm biding its time. Cane poured more drinks. He did it smoothly, without ceremony, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He filled Damian's glass generously from one bottle, and then turned back to refill his own from a different decanter altogether. When Damian raised an eyebrow, Cane chuckled. "This one's just a preference of mine," he said, lifting the bottle slightly. "It's a little rarer, a little stronger. Old habit." Damian didn't press further. Why would he? Everything about the room, the polished wood, the low jazz playing on vinyl, the way the lighting made everything glow in honeyed amber, invited trust. So Damian drank. At first it was laughter. They reminisced about business mishaps and mutual acquaintances, made jokes about boardroom egos and family drama, and shared stories that men often do when they want to prove they're no longer enemies. Damian let himself sink into the night, the liquor loosening his shoulders, warming his chest, dulling his instincts. But Cane? Cane remained curiously sober. His speech precise. His eyes too alert. And his glass never quite emptied. He played his part with mastery, measuring Damian's descent with surgical precision. The trap wasn't just in the drink, it was in the mood, in the rhythm of the evening, in the careful way he calibrated each moment to lead Damian further into vulnerability. Time passed, though neither man counted it. Eventually, the room began to shift for Damian. First it was a sense of imbalance. A strange weight in his stomach. Then, the temperature seemed to rise though the fire had begun to dim. His vision flickered for a heartbeat. He tried to laugh it off, placing a hand on his forehead, then on his abdomen. Something wasn't right. A sudden cramp struck him mid-sentence. The smile fell from his face like a shattered glass. I don't feel good," he mumbled. He tried to stand, but his knees buckled slightly. Cane was at his side in an instant, face etched with mock concern. "Damian? Hey, are you all right?" Cane said, projecting panic to the empty room like a stage actor who knew every line in advance. Damian's breath quickened. His hands shook. He clutched at his stomach again as his world tilted. Pain radiated from within like a slow explosion. Sweat beaded on his brow. His eyes darted, searching for clarity, for reason, but it was all slipping from him now. He reached toward Cane, mouth opening to speak, but no words came. He collapsed, a lifeless weight against the hardwood floor, and the last thing he saw before the darkness consumed him was Cane's hand, still holding the glass, still calm, still steady. Then, nothing. A silence so deep it erased identity. A darkness so absolute it swallowed time. Cane stood still for a moment, letting the silence settle like dust on the aftermath. He looked down at Damian's unconscious form, calm, methodical. The performance had been flawless. Every word rehearsed. Every pore measured. Every gesture choreographed to give the illusion of accidental collapse. Now, the real work would begin. He kneeled beside Damian, placed a hand on his shoulder, and shouted his name with convincing urgency. Damian. Damian, wake up. His voice echoed against the stone fireplace, and his hands shook Damian's body just enough to sell the fear, just enough for plausible deniability. If anyone walked in now, they would see a man desperate to revive a friend, not a predator executing a plan. But Cane knew there would be no interruption. He had orchestrated the night down to the last second. The staff had been dismissed. The security system was under his control. The cameras, if anyone checked, would show nothing but a private, cordial evening between two men making peace. He exhaled slowly. Then, standing tall, he moved toward the liquor cart and wiped Damian's glass clean with a cloth already tucked in his back pocket. He disposed of the bottle, his real bottle, into a bag with gloved hands. His fingerprints would never be found on it. Then he retrieved a small vial from a hidden drawer in the bar. The substance inside was colorless, odorless, and precisely dosed to induce temporary unconsciousness without long-term trace. He'd used just enough. Damian would wake, eventually. But not before Cane had finished what he started. He turned back to the body lying at his feet, his expression shifting now. The mask dropped. The facade of civility, of sadness, of brotherhood, was gone. What remained was pure, concentrated purpose. Cane had never truly let go of Lily. No man does, not when love has been bound by betrayal, not when memory haunts the soul like a persistent ghost. Watching her laugh in Damian's arms had ignited a darkness in him that had once lain dormant, a possessive fury sharpened by rejection. And now, that fury had found its outlet. But this wasn't just about jealousy. This was about territory. About reclaiming power, resetting the game board. Damian had been too perfect, too noble, too unshakable in Lily's eyes. Cane needed to fracture that image. To drag him down, make him fall, and when he did, Lily would have no choice but to remember who had always been there for her. The rescue, the protector, the constant, Cane. He knelt once more, pulled a small injection kit from the hidden drawer behind the bar, and reached for Damian's arm. This next part, he'd rehearsed in his mind 1,000 times. But before he could begin, he paused, eyes narrowing as a faint creak echoed from the far end of the hallway. Was it the wind? A foundation shift? Or had someone returned early? His jaw tightened. Every second counted now. The plan was still in motion, but this was the point of no return. Damian's consciousness returned not with clarity but with confusion, thick, choking, paralyzing confusion. The first sensation was cold. Not the kind of cold from weather or illness, but something sterile and artificial, like metal beneath his skin. His limbs felt weighted, immovable. His mouth was dry, his tongue thick against the roof of his mouth. The harsh fluorescent lights above him flickered rhythmically, humming a mechanical lullaby that made his head throb with dull pain. He tried to sit up, but found that his wrists and ankles were restrained tightly. Panic bloomed in his chest. He blinked rapidly, trying to force his vision into focus. The walls were white, too white. The scent in the air was antiseptic, with an undercurrent of something foul and coppery. It wasn't a hospital. It was a parody of one, a twisted imitation. The room was too quiet, too clean, yet steeped in a sense of menace. Then he heard it, the sound of footsteps echoing slowly down the corridor beyond the door. Each step deliberate, mocking, filled with anticipation. The door creaked open, and in walked a man in a white coat, his face hidden behind a surgical mask stained faintly red at the edges. His eyes were electric with madness. Wide, glassy, and feverish, as if burning with an inner delirium that fed on suffering. In one gloved hand, he held a syringe filled with a murky, amber fluid that glowed faintly under the buzzing light. In the other, a leather medical case smeared with grime and age. He tilted his head and smiled, a grotesque twist of lips beneath his mask, and then he laughed, high-pitched, unhinged, bouncing off the walls with manic rhythm. Damian strained against the restraints, muscles burning with effort, but the cuffs bit deeper into his skin. The doctor took a step forward, lifting the syringe like a chalice in some ritualistic offering. "Time for your medicine," he whispered in a sing-song voice, as if delivering comfort instead of terror. Damian's heart thundered. He didn't know what was in the needle, didn't know how he got here or why, but he knew this man was no healer. This was not about treatment. This was about control. About breaking him. Meanwhile, elsewhere in Genoa City, a storm was brewing. This one of heartbreak and suspicion. Lily stood in the middle of the Abbott Estate's grand foyer, her voice raw with fury, her eyes filled with tears that shimmered under the chandelier's crystal light. She stared Cane down with disbelief, every muscle in her body trembling with desperation. "Where is he?" she screamed, her voice cracking. "Where's Damian?" Cane raised his hands, calm, detached, carefully composed. "Lily, I have no idea," he said, feigning concern. "He had a few drinks. He said he was calling a cab. That's the last I saw him." His lie was smooth, practiced. He even reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "See? Nothing from him." He scrolled through a blank screen. "I was going to text you if he didn't check in." But Lily was unraveling. Her instincts screamed that something was wrong. Damian would never just disappear, not like this. Not after how connected they'd become. Not without a word. "You're lying to me," she whispered. "I know you, Cane. I know when you're hiding something." Cane's eyes flashed for just a moment, but he remained cool. "You're upset. I get that. But don't turn this into something it's not." She backed away, her breath coming fast, her voice shaky. "If you did something to him," but the words choked in her throat. Cane didn't reply. He simply turned and walked away, leaving Lily standing in a silence so thick it crushed her chest. She collapsed into a chair, hands in her hair, her body heaving as tears finally overcame her restraint. She couldn't stop them. The fear was too real now. Elsewhere, Chance was already in motion. After hearing about Damian's disappearance, something in his gut twisted. There were too many coincidences. A private gathering with Cane. No witnesses. No calls or messages afterward. And Damian had always been careful, never one to leave loose ends. Chance knew Cane's history well enough to doubt every word the man had uttered. He put out informal alerts, traced Damian's last known location through ride-share records, but it led nowhere. The cab that supposedly picked him up? Faked. The ID? Disconnected. The footage from the street outside Cane's property had mysteriously been erased. Chance's jaw clenched as the pieces refused to fit. Someone covered this up, he muttered under his breath. And that someone had the resources, the intelligence, and the motive. His mind turned to Lily. He needed to talk to her again, urgently. If Cane was involved, if this was more than just a disappearance, then Damian was in grave danger. And time was running out. Back in that cold, sterile chamber of nightmares, the syringe inched closer to Damian's arm. The deranged doctor giggled again, as if the anticipation was a delight in itself. "Don't worry," he said, eyes wide, "this won't kill you." "Not yet. But it will help us understand you. Piece by piece." But before he could inject the needle, Damian turned his head and slammed it against the side rail of the bed. Hard. Pain exploded through his temple, but the force caused the restraint on his right wrist to loosen. It was just enough. He used the momentum to twist his body and kicked his leg upward, catching the doctor by surprise. The syringe fell to the floor, the fluid leaking out like blood. Damian knew he had seconds before the man recovered. He twisted harder, pain shooting up his arm, until the cuff snapped open and his hand was free. But the door creaked again. Footsteps approached. More than one set. Not nurses. Not guards. Trained operatives. Cane's people. The room was about to become a slaughterhouse.